Welcome to Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Hey, that's me. Hi, and welcome to Positive Talk. Our show features the best positive stories and people from around the globe as we endeavor to answer the universal question of why am I here and what is my purpose? Understanding that can change everything, and knowing your greatness is fundamental to living your best life. So join us right now as together we work to create the adventure of our lifetime. And welcome to the show, everybody. I do have to tell you that this is one of the most favorite. I wish I could speak English. One of my favorite types of shows that we get to do with some of my favorite people of all time, and they're educational and they teach people and they laugh a little bit and we have a good time. And today is no exception because we're going to talk about. Well, first of all, I want to introduce Holly Berry, who is my associate, and she is the one. It's you're the one responsible for putting this all together. So I want to thank you for that. And if you'd like to introduce everybody, that would be great. Or the Passionista. Introduce everybody.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you so much for having me here as well today. It makes the beginning of the week actually something to look forward to instead of dread, that I get to come on to Positive Talk Radio and bring with me Amy and Nancy Harrington of the Passionistas Project. And they, in turn, bring one of their Passionistas from their sisterhood to be featured twice a month by you, Captain Kevin. So today we have Amy and Nancy Harrington and then Dalia Riviera.
Yeah.
Hi. Welcome to the show, Dalia. It's great to have you here, ladies. Thank you for bringing her here today.
Always.
How did you guys run into her or get to meet her?
We met Dolly through, if you're regular listeners, you've heard this thread before, but I have a friend named Julie DeLuca Collins, who's also a friend of Positive Talk Radio. During COVID, Julie told us about a thing called Clubhouse that we had never heard of, which no one talks about anymore. And Julie said, you have to check out this group called Amigos that was founded by a woman named Denai Escanavarino, who is amazing. And then when we were looking to give awards at our 2022 Passionistas, Power of Passionistas Summit, Julie had introduced us to Dolly. And Dolly said to us, you need to meet Denai Escanavarino, who we still hadn't met. So long story short, Denai received an award. Dolly and Julie co-presented it to her. We've interviewed Dolly for our podcast. Dolly is one of the few Passionistas that we've actually met in person. We almost got to see her again a couple weekends ago, but timing didn't work out. And she's just one of our favorite people. We adore her. And she is about to become one of our newest Power Passionistas in the sisterhood. Yay. She'll have her own space where she can communicate more directly with everybody in the sisterhood. And she's just an amazing mom and person. And we adore Dolly. And we're just so glad she's here with us.
Thank you so much for those kind words. It's been so amazing getting to know both of you and just seeing all of the work that you do. So and of course being here and meeting Kevin and Holly. Thank you all so much.
It's a pleasure. Do you want to tell everybody a bit about what you do, Dolly? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, so my name is Dali Rivera. I live in Maryland and I help people pretty much wherever they are because I do a lot of my work virtually by educating mostly parents and educators about bullying awareness and prevention. And as you know, it is October. In case you did not know, October is National Bullying Awareness and Prevention Month. Yay. So I've been doing this work for many years. Officially, when I started my LLC, that was like back in 2019. But I began way before that. And I really began the work because my baby was bullied when she was 5. And it was very shocking to me because it happened to me growing up as an immigrant child. I thought it was just like because I was the immigrant child and I was so different. So when it happened to my baby and she was like very rambunctious, very outspoken, happy, she was friendly with everybody. And then it happened to her and it was starting to change her view of herself, I was like, oh no, I need to do something about this. And then the school kept saying we're going to follow these protocols. We can't do this, we can't do that. Everything was, I can't do this and that. And I was like, well, let me look into this. At the time, I was in my master's program, and part of my master's program is the concentration was social policy and leadership. So I was like, hey, I'm learning about social policies. Let me look into this bullying phenomenon. And I just started finding out so many stats, so many awful um, attempted solutions. And I was like, well, I need to educate the parents, because where we're failing is that parents are not being educated by the schools, because it's almost like the schools are too scared to give them that powerful tool. And they have a mentality of us versus them on both sides. So I just began sharing the information, and next thing you know, I had a business, and I haven't stopped since. And it's been hard, let me tell you, because there are so many schools that advocate, yeah, we're gonna have a no tolerance policy, we're gonna protect the kids. But then when I try to work with them, they're like, oh no, thanks, we're good. And it's really disheartening. But then what keeps me going is every time I help somebody, and then we work through their issues and their obstacles, and then I help them get the solutions, and then the kids are really happy. So that just makes it all worthwhile. But it's like a really tumultuous roller coaster of emotions all the time. So that's my story in a nutshell.
That's a great story. Now, Holly has got some questions for you, and this is a subject that she is also passionate about.
I am, and I am not that educated on it. I did experience it in junior high and high school, though, and so I am so grateful that you're doing the work you're doing, and that you're getting the tools to the people that need it. And I hope so many people listen to this show. Please share it, listeners. Please share this if you have a friend or a relative, or a kid like that's experienced it. Yes, get this information out there. One of the first questions on the list that I loved was, what advice would you give to someone who is currently being bullied?
Oh my goodness, that's such a good question. Reach out to at least one person that you know that genuinely loves you, because I think a lot of us, I know from my experience as a child being bullied, I was always too worried about putting too much on my parents. Or, well, I had one parent that was, my mom, she carried so much of the load of all kinds of stuff. And then my dad was like, don't you come here all beaten up. I'm going to whoop your butt if you do. So then I had those two reasons. Well, if I tell my dad, it's just going to get worse. If I tell my mom, she's already got too much going on. And then I didn't really have friends, because it was, I was new to the US, learning the language. I didn't really have that closeness with anyone. So stats show that kids who are going through bullying, or kids who have already gone through it, all they need is just one person to truly give them the support and make them feel like, hey, this is not your fault. Even if you misspoke, even if you did insult that person, the physical abuse and the constant bullying is not something that you deserve, because people have squabbles, but it shouldn't lead to bullying. So yeah, just find that one person. It can be a teacher, it can be a friend, it can be a family member, it can be your grandparent, or a favorite cousin, just somebody to be there for you, because a lot of kids, they just need that to feel like they're not alone.
That's so valuable. And if someone had been there to tell me that, I might have actually tried to talk to someone about it. The next one leads right from that in a perfect segue. So how do you define bullying, and what are its different forms?
Oh, this is such a good question. So please pay attention, listeners, because bullying is defined so differently from institution to institution, not just schools. States have their own definitions, and right now there's a bill in Congress that's trying to be passed. But part of it, the issue is that there is no federal definition of bullying. But the general one that I want you to walk away with is, bullying is unwanted. Number one, it is aggressive behavior among people, not just school age people. It can be anybody. And it involves a real or perceived power imbalance, meaning like for example, my bully was, she was super popular, and that gave her a power, in the community, which was the school. So, whatever she said about me, everybody's like, oh, what she said, they're like, Dali she smells. Okay, now everybody, because so and so said it, Dali smells. We don't want to play with her. We don't want to talk to her. We're gonna actually beat her up if we want to. So that person has some kind of power. It could be a teacher. It could be the parent, because parents, unfortunately, sometimes are bullies too. It could be like the son or the daughter of somebody who has some kind of authority in the community, like the preacher's child or the principal's child or the school psychologist's nephew, just somebody who has some kind of power there that throws you off and it makes you feel like, okay, well, you don't have this type of status, And the other thing is the behavior is repeated or has the potential to be repeated over time. However, a caveat here is that sometimes it takes just one incident for it to be considered bullying because it is pretty intense. And so it comes in so many different forms, and like physical bullying, cyberbullying, verbal bullying, mental bullying. There's many, and I think a lot of people don't understand what it looks like because a lot of it is not your physical, like bruise on the face. That's very obvious. So I can keep going, but I'll stop right now.
This is perfect. Like, this is leading right to the next question I wanted to ask, what are some early signs that someone may be experiencing bullying?
Oh, yes, another great question. So because we have different types of bullying, the signs can vary, but normally your kids, right? So if you see a change of behavior overall, you might want to ask some questions. And there's nothing wrong with being direct and asking, hey, are you being bullied? Most people won't do that because that's not your first go-to, right? But let me give you more specific examples of different types of bullying. Okay, so for example, if your child is being cyberbullied, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're online. It could be a text message that's being sent to them or nasty phone calls. And suddenly they're jolting at the sound of their phone going off or a phone going off, or they're avoiding any devices. They're no longer playing their game systems. They're no longer wanting to check email. They're avoiding technology altogether. That's kind of a little weird, especially for a teenager or a child, because they're so glued to their devices. If they come home disheveled for no reason, and they're like, oh, I fell, but I'm like, that's kind of weird because you don't usually fail. You're not a clumsy kid, and this is happening more often. Or if they're coming home with a new book bag and they can't explain why they had to go get a new one, if they are talking a lot about self-harm or about just negative things about themselves, and they might be mentally or verbally being abused. So ask open-ended questions because teenagers are hard to talk to. Sometimes they're like, yeah, sure, fine, yes, no. Those are
one-word answers.
So you might want to just get creative. And one of the things that I've always used for my kids, because it is sometimes the younger ones, it's harder for them to express themselves, and then the older ones just don't want to. So at dinner time, I would always ask them 3 questions, and they were, give me 3 good things that happened to you today. Give me 3 bad things. And then the magic question that always gave me the extra answers that I was looking for was, if you could change something today out of your day, what would it be? And that's when I'd find out, like, well, so-and-so was doing this. I'm like, oh, so, I mean, create your own method of asking questions. But those type of questions that open up a conversation is really what you're looking for. And, like sometimes when kids suddenly stop talking with their friends, I'm like, hey, what's going on there? Why aren't you talking to Sarah anymore? Or Lily, like, what happened? And, oh, nothing. Are you sure everything's okay? You didn't get into an argument? So you have to try to just get it out of them, and always know who their friends are. Please, you have no idea how many people don't know the names of their friends, or like even like where they live, or anything like that. So just be in the know as much as you can about your kids.
So are you telling me then that, or telling us that it's important for you to maybe, I don't know, sit down and have dinner with your children every now and again?
I know that here in the US that has been, a dying tradition, which is sad because that really is when you have a lot of time with your kids. As a matter of fact, this is in 2020. I read a study that was about 3 years or 4 years old then, But this study showed that parents on a normal day, on an average day, would spend not even 15 minutes of actual talk time with their children. They were interact all day long, but it was things like go do your homework, oh go mop the floors, or make sure you put the dishes away, walk the dog, take the trash out. So it was like that, or like, what are you watching right now? But no real conversation.
Wow.
And so please, like, just have a conversation. Your kids might seem like they don't want you to ask about their going ons, but they actually do want their parents to be interested in what's going on with them. And one of the things that I urge you to do too is, like, if you're not interested in their topic, please just fake it. Just fake it. I'm being honest, like, because if they're like, oh, mom and dad, like, they don't care, so they're not going to want to share. And I've done that with my children, and they know it too now that they're older. But they appreciate it because they were like, you know what, you were the only one that took interest. And I was like, and you know what, it was torture to have to listen to that. I'm just being real. So they get it
That
now,
is
but-
true love.
Yes. I was like, but that's what you do for a loved one. So it's no different with children, right? You just hear out about. I mean, how many times has your partner, your spouse, come home talking about their job, and you're like, oh Lord, I don't want to listen to Larry at accounting anymore.
I was just gonna say, I have learned so much about car parts and engine parts and things I would have never looked up on my own because I'm like, tell me more.
I know. Yes, catalytic converters, $300. You know. Right.
Oh man, true love.
Truly.
Well, so I wanted to ask you, because there are so many times when, and I've talked to a lot of friends and family and other people, that they say they get this sense that their child's being bullied, or they have information that their child is being bullied at school, as an example. And so they go to the school, and the school shuts them down because, oh, I'm sorry, we haven't seen that here, and your daughter is not behaving appropriately all the time either, and stuff like that. How do you deal with that when they're not getting any results from the people who should be making sure this stuff isn't happening?
I'm so glad you asked this question. This is why I created the Diversity and Anti-Bullying Academy, because we touch on so much of this, and this is a big part of what I teach. So the advocacy process is it can be very delicate because you know that educators are going to already have certain embedded stereotypes in their head. So when they hear certain things, they automatically make a decision, not realizing it. So I always tell parents, start with knowing the information that they have available to you for free, which is the bullying policy, anti-bullying policy, or bullying prevention policy that they have at the school. Read it. And it should be clear. If it's not clear, you should be able to just call either the school principal, the assistant principal, the secretary, and just have them explain certain things to you. But earlier you asked about the definition of bullying. And I mentioned that it is described or defined differently with each institution. And that's what you're going to look for in those policies, how it's defined. And usually they give you examples. So you need to pretty much pair up those examples with what has happened to your child. You're almost like your own attorney, which is sad, but it's the reality. And then there's always me. You can always call me for a consult, and we look at all your stuff together. But
What's your website, real quick, while we're on that?
Oh yes, thank you. Yes, DaliTalks.com, and that's DaliTalks.com. So I've helped so many parents. Usually call me with this problem, and I'm like, okay, let's start with the policy. Okay, what have you done? Okay, now let's focus on the lingo you're going to use, and you're going to make sure that you're not emotional, because when they see you very emotional, they will judge you, and they will not take you so seriously. So, I mean, there's so much more. This is like, I can go into like over an hour talking just about this, but everything has to be written down, even phone calls. After a phone call, you take a notebook, you jot everything down, an email or a phone call. You follow up in an email saying, thank you for this call. We just spoke about this and this and this. I'm just summarizing in case, I lost the translation. Correct me if I'm wrong. And also so you can have records. When you submit a incident complaint, the report into their system, either whether you walk it in on paper, like old school, or through their websites, that is now a permanent record that you submitted this concern, and now it is legal. You just going into the school and talking to them does not legally hold them accountable to anything. You want it in writing. So I always tell parents, it's exhausting. Yes, it is. But always track everything, every phone call. Send in that summarized recap of your conversation. Follow up, because in that policy, you're also going to find out how many days do they have to respond to you. And then acknowledging that they received your complaint is different than the date that they have to do the investigation. Like, how many days do they have? Is there an appeals process? What happens if you're still not happy with the solution? And you should always be in a collaborative state with them, coming up with a solution. It's not up to them. It's between you, your child, and them. So don't let them make the decision. You have to be okay with it, because you know what's going to work best for your kid. I've seen situations where they'll say, well, we're going to have to assign a chaperone to your kids so that every time that they come out of every class period, they're walked over to the next classroom so that they don't get attacked. And then what happened on the first day? There was nobody there. Nobody showed up, and the kid got attacked. So you need to, what is realistic to you, So policy, read your policy, be up to date, make sure you follow up, record everything. And then if you need additional help, you can call somebody like me, or you can even go to your PTA, or just other parents who have gone through that process can also be such a great resource to you. You just have to ask. And a lot of parents, I think, they don't even realize that they can do that. There's so many little nuggets that the school could be giving out to the parents, but like so many of them, when I call them to offer my services, because I offer workshops to them for the parents, and I ask them, well, is this something that you're interested in, or that your parents are interested in? They always say, well, no. I said, oh, are you sure? Have you asked the parents? They're like, well, no, we haven't. Well, why haven't you asked the parents? Well, they haven't really shown any interest. They haven't expressed it. And I was like, well, sometimes it's because parents don't really know that they have the power to do that. Parents don't realize that that is part of the budget that is created by Congress within the education system that pays for resources like these to keep their children safe, because their number one legal priority in this country is to keep your child safe. The second legal priority for them, for the schools, is to give them a good quality education. And a lot of people think it's the other way around.
I got to ask you a real quick question. It's a little off topic, but
Okay.
maybe it isn't. There is a movement in this country about getting rid of the education department.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some people that are saying, well, I don't know what they're saying, because I don't believe any of it anyway, but they want to get rid of the education department. Isn't that a necessary safeguard for what did you tell me? Should we get rid of that, or should we keep it?
I think that the education system is such an enormous system that it is impossible to be perfect, and whatever it's replaced with is going to be the same, because the larger an institution, the harder it is to maintain. And also, why reinvent the wheel? Like, that's my thing. Like, you already have this system, right? It's not perfect, we know, but we do know what's not working, and yet you don't want to focus your energy and money and resources in that. And the number one thing is, you're not listening to your clients, because if you think about it, the education system is a business. So as a business owner, wouldn't you want to listen to your end users, which are your children and the parents? Why aren't we doing that? So I don't believe it's necessary. If I were to see a beautifully laid out plan that's actually going to be executed the way that it is intended, then let's go for it. But look, that's what Congress does every year, right? All these policies and laws and stuff that are supposed to be perfect, and then as it trickles on down, it is misinterpreted or purposely, read a different way to implement it in a very different way than it was originally intended. So I think that the solution, or part of the solution, is that parents recognize how much power they have to tell the schools what it is they want and what resources they need to better help their children, and also the resources that their children need to be directly given as well.
Holly?
Would you like another question, Kevin?
Well, you came into this so excited, and I want to make sure that you get all the questions answered.
This is good stuff. This is really, really helpful. The next one I thought would be cool to ask is, what are some of the common misconceptions about bullying that you encounter?
Oh man, these are like never ending and they don't die off. And I wish they would. So one of them is bullying doesn't really exist. Kids are just soft. And I think that people don't understand how intense it can be. And even, I've heard this even from people who have been bullied, but it's how you think of everything. I get it that, you should see the silver lining in everything. But I also believe that there are some experiences in life that are not necessary to learn a certain lesson. There's a lot of cyberbullying that goes on, and it is so intense. And we all know this. We see this. I mean, the youngest kid that has taken their life due to bullying has been the age 6. And people refuse to accept that. Every school shooting, when they look at the background of the person who went and did the heinous act, has a correlation of bullying, that that they had been bullied at some point or another. It's an issue also of mental health. It impacts, like, there are so many studies that show that bullying has a negative effect on mental health, not just on the bully and not just on the victim, but the witnesses as well. And these people grow up to be adults. I remember speaking to an 84-year-old man who cried just telling me his story about how he was bullied in school and the teacher helped. And that's just very impactful, because it diminishes your self-worth, especially when there's no one speaking out to, defend you. But anyway, I'm getting away from the question, but myths. So yeah, that they're too soft, that kids don't know how to resolve conflict, that kids are just not educated, that they think everything is bullied. And I believe that there is part truth in today's world, where we do sometimes take a word and it's taken out of context. And that is because we're not having conversations with kids. We're not giving them specific examples of what it can look like. So when you just throw a word around, it can be about anything. I mean, just like DEI, like CRT, critical race theory, all of this. That's why we're having all these issues right now, and the nation's so divided, because they just take these words, they don't really understand them, they don't study them, they just go based off of what they heard somebody else say, and all of that contributes to it. The other thing is the snitches get stitches culture. People are so afraid to speak up because they feel like, oh, I have to be, like very committed to my community. We don't do that to our community members, regardless of what they do. Isn't that dumb? It's like allowing somebody to come into your house and destroy it or hurt everybody, but then you're still not going to say a darn thing. And I know that happens in real life to some people and they still don't say anything. But it's also a misconception of what is reporting and what is snitching. Because when you're snitching, you're trying to hurt somebody just because you're being vindictive. When you're reporting is because you're trying to keep everybody safe, sometimes including the darn bully. And so we need to educate. Education is so important to just eradicate all of these myths and these stereotypes.
Is there education going on in the schools now that is geared towards anti-bullying and that kind of thing? Is it a thing that they're talking about to the kids, or is it kind of not?
It depends on the schools. There's definitely
That's so disheartening, by the way.
It is. It's very disheartening, because their excuse is always, oh, we don't have the budget. Then create one. Dang it, because you can create a budget for anything else. Look, And this is where I tell again, the parents, you have so much power. PTA is an organization made up of parents. You have the African American Parent Association. You have ELAC. You have parent committees of the kids who have disabilities. You have all these parent committees, all these parent groups and associations. And you're telling me you can't bond together, come together and pay somebody to come and educate the kids or the teachers or your school principals? That is a lame excuse. We are in the United States where we have come up with so many inventions, so many solutions to so many problems. And you're telling me that you don't have money to come and educate your parents? No, you should not accept that as a parent. And if you are a parent, you have the power to suggest this at the PTA meetings or at the site school council meeting or at the school board meetings. And if you go to school board meetings, you know that they're lengthy, they're boring, and you only have 5 minutes to speak. And I think a lot of people are very intimidated by walking up in there and standing in front of this board of, people. And then it's also disheartening because you hear and you see people walking up there giving solutions or their grievances, and then nothing happens. But I think that happens because, again, parents are not coming together and demanding solutions. So the schools do have these anti-bullying programs or bullying prevention programs. Sometimes they call them kindness programs or something like that. But they are supposed to be created and ran or implemented by the school psychologist. Not every school has a school psychologist, and the schools that do have one school psychologist that bounces from one school to another in different days. So if you as a parent want to reach out to that person, you absolutely can, and say, hey, what is your program? Do you have one? Is it being implemented? If it's not being implemented, can I help run it? Because you as a parent, as a grandparent, as an aunt or uncle, have the power to go and volunteer. All you have to do is do that little screen, background screening, and your TV shot to go in and help. But ask if they have a program. A lot of parents have no idea if their kids are being talked to about bullying. And a lot of people also have this myth that, it's going to take too much education time. It's going to take up the teacher's time too much. No, it's just, 5 little minutes. Even at the beginning of the day as kids walk in, if you have a short and sweet message, over time, as long as you do it consistently, kids are going to learn. It should be like a daily thing, not just only when somebody gets into big trouble or the spotlight is on the school because somebody got bullied, or a big event happened in the nation, so we're going to talk about it right now. That's what I find that happens where that's when it mostly gets spoken about, or usually even at the beginning of the school year. And then they send you home with this paper, you read it, sometimes you sign it and send it back, and then you forget about it. And that's not helping kids. That's definitely not helping our communities.
Well, and I'll tell you that, and Holly, I'd love your opinion and to comment on this, but it is, in my opinion, I was bullied when I was a kid. I was also a bullier when I was a kid. But it impacts people for a lifetime. Yeah. So I think 5 minutes a day is the least that we should be doing, and we should be doing more. Like I'd get rid of I don't know, something, and that in order to be able to do that, so that people understand that we need to be kind and gentle to each other, because it affects people for their entire life. Right. Holly, what your opinion?
On which part of it? I'm so good at general questions, Kevin.
Okay, what do you think?
Kevin,
go ahead, Dolly.
Kevin, there's something that you said that I want to address because it's so important and it's very common. But kids who get bullied eventually, most often, become the bully, especially when they don't get the help that they need, because you realize, well, dang, nobody's coming after this guy, and they see what he's doing to me. So in order to survive, I'm going to do the same thing. And it's so common because it's like a mentality of survival.
What happened to me when I was a freshman, it was a brand new school, and we had freshmen, junior, or sophomores and juniors, and I got bullied by a junior. Well, you know what happened when I became a junior? I bullied the freshman.
Yeah, that's also like, I think part of the school culture that we need to eliminate. It's like, I don't know why we decided that the newbies always have to be hazed. I think it comes from that hazing culture, and you know, it
Well,
has.
as it turns out, it was the same thing. When I was a freshman, I thought I was pretty cool, and I learned that I wasn't. And then when this kid came in and he was a freshman, he thought he was pretty cool, so he had to be taught. No, you're not.
You thought you were humbling him down, right?
Exactly. I was giving him some good stern lesson. No, I just
But you know, that is so common. It's just like there are certain things, and it all comes because, you know, we're not educated about these behaviors, and especially when we come from an era where that was so normal. I mean, in order to change something in society, it takes generations to change it. It's not easy. Otherwise, we would have done it a long time ago. You know, so it is having these little conversations, and because, you know, kids don't want to be sat down and taught about bullying. That's boring. Who's going to listen? So the way that you do it is just like you learn any, like, media. The media is so powerful. You know, if you're watching a TV show with your kid and you happen to see a scene about, well, let's take for example, the slap heard around the world, you know, Will Smith. Have a discussion about that. You know, like, hey, what do you think about that? You just start with stuff like that, just common everyday things. What about the debate? How do you think the debate between the VPs went versus the ones running for president? How different were they? What do you think what was different? Or like, you know, just don't be afraid to have these discussions. And, you know, you learn so much from your kids as you're doing this, and you learn about what they're perceiving from the media, because these kids are watching things every single day. They're listening to music that say things that might go against your values and your morals. And if you're not having these conversations, you're going to find out later in life. They're like, oh, they're like, why are you doing that? Oh, well, this is just how I think. Well, where did that come from? Because that's not how I raised you, you know. But that's what happens when you don't have these conversations with kids. And I think there's also a lot of kids out there that are watching things that they think that's really how life should be. It's so unrealistic, and it's kind of scary, you know. So please have conversations with your kids. Make it more than 15 minutes a day. Hey, you know what you should do? Just keep them hostage in your car, go for a drive, 30 minutes. Hey, you get your conversation.
We're going to get ice cream.
I know.
Dolly, do you ever have parents who are parents of bullies come to you for help?
Yes. You know what? The first one was this young woman whose child was brilliant, so smart, that she was very arrogant about it, and she bullied people, and she used to belittle them. And that's actually one of the things that I focus on is language, because kids, they feel that horrible treatment, right? But they don't have the language to express it. They can't articulate that somebody gave them a backhanded compliment or that they were being belittled. But I remember she came to me and she was like, hey, look, my daughter, she's super smart, but she talks down to kids all the time. Is that bullying? And I'm like, well, is she doing that all the time? What's going on? It's like, yeah. So like, if you notice certain things happening when she walks into certain spaces, like people scatter, and she's like, yes, you know. I was like, oh. And then have you heard anybody call her certain names, like the problem child, or the mean kid, or the bully? And she's like, no, you know, I've heard them say, you know, like, oh, here comes so and so. Like, those are all signs that your child might be the bully. So the key there is getting to the root to why. In this situation, this child, she just thought she couldn't understand why people could not be as smart as her. So she needed to teach her empathy, and teach her, like, not everybody learns the same way that you do. So it is so important to get to that root of why, and then also give them love instead of shaming them, and saying, hey, this is not gonna define you, because I'm gonna teach you. You have to have empathy for others, and you're a really good person. You're just going about it the wrong way. And yeah, there are some kids that are there out there deliberately doing it because they actually feel joy in making people miserable. That's a whole nother level. And I highly suggest that you seek professional mental health help for that because it can be a huge undertaking. Um, but most kids, they're doing it for survival or just because that's the behavior that they see at home and they think it's normal. Or they might be a little arrogant and overly confident and just misconstrue that and think, well, they're beneath me, So again, having these conversations is very crucial and educating them about what bullying is, what it can look like in different ways.
Holly.
Right.
I would love to hear more about so initially you shared that it was seeing your daughter like at 5 years old experiencing bullying, and from there you started educating yourself, and I'd love to hear more about how that's impacted her, where she's at,
Oh
if you
yeah.
saw her use certain tools, some of the after effects of that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking. My baby's now 18. She's, she's an adult now. Thank goodness she is still very confident. And like any other kid, they have their little insecurities here and there. But she did go through a phase where she was the bully because people kept coming at her, and that actually happened in middle school, which is very normal for kids to experience. It peaks in sixth, seventh, eighth grade. That is the highest. And then when they go to high school, it drops down a little bit. So, of course, I remember having a conversation. I'm like, hey, I am the bullying awareness educator. You cannot be doing this. Like, it's like, I've taught you better than this, And so I nipped it in the bud right away. And I had to, because she's very smart. And I remember when she explained why she was doing what she was doing, it was back to just like that little girl. The first time that a parent asked me about, their child being a bully, I was like, oh my gosh, you're that kid too. Like she's very, very smart, and she just had no patience with certain people, and she, called them names. I'm like, no, you don't do that. But that was quickly, done away with. And she became, and also an advocate of others. And she got very passionate about walking up to the bullying, telling them to cut it out, which is a whole nother thing too, that kids have a misconception that if you step in to help the person being bullied, that you're going to become the victim. I understand that is in some cases true, but the majority of times, depending on how you do it, that does not happen because kids feel more responsible to their social culture, to their peers. So being told by a parent, hey, cut it out, is so less powerful than when it comes for another peer. When peers say, hey, dude, we don't do that. And also, don't call out the person, you call out the action, because when you call out the person, then that's a personal attack. So, for example, if I say, hey, stop being a bully versus, hey, we don't do that bullying behavior here. Big difference. So it's also teaching kids how to respond or how to neutralize the situation. So I taught my daughter how to do that, and she became a really good advocate for kids. And I feel like that made her even sweeter. So yeah, she's a great kid. I'm proud of her.
But and I don't know what it would be like. I mean, it was 50 years since I was in high school. So I can't imagine what it's like to be in high school today or junior high school, especially for girls, with body shaming that goes on, and with the different thing, and with social media, and with all that stuff that doesn't have to be true. You can say anything you want, and nobody's gonna find out. It's got to be horrible.
Yeah. Oh, I have seen just so many things. It's so disheartening. I too, I'm so grateful I'm not in high school in this era, because it is vitriol. I mean, it is it is like a movie. And so yeah, I am, when my daughter graduated, she graduated and I was like, oh, thank goodness she's out of the education system. And then I have another one, she's going to be 17 real soon, and she's homeschooled because she was like, no, the schools are not helping. And that too, listen to me, because I am a parent who has a high school kid who is not in traditional high school because of the violence and bullying issues. Okay. because I tried working with that school and they were not listening. And I teach this for a living. So that's how bad it can be. And there's nothing wrong with you uh, pulling your child out of that school and putting them in a safer option for schooling. There's nothing wrong, because there's a lot of shame. They're like, oh, you couldn't hack it because no, there is no need. If you have another way of educating your child in a safe space where they're not going to be stressed out all those 4 years, where they're going to be safe, and they don't have to deal with any of that, why not? And the homeschooling, that actually nationwide, the homeschooling reasons has been because, well, first is lower quality of education, but the second is violence in schools, which includes bullying. So those are the two main reasons why parents are pulling their kids out of traditional school, and that includes private schools. I've had so many parents that say, oh, my kid goes to a Christian private school, she'll be fine. A year later, she's like, my kid has been bullied this whole time, I can't take it, what can I do? I'm like, yeah, it doesn't matter if they're a Christian-based or faith-based school.
Mhm.
Kids are kids. Kids can be little a-holes anywhere. So they bully others at church. Okay, I have had parents who have had to deal with that too. So there is no exemption. And class, race, that anything, there is no exception. If you're,
Dolly, I want to make this point because I went to a Lutheran school from grades 1 through 8th grade.
Mhm.
And the reality is, okay, it's a Lutheran school, right? And so there, consequently, you think certain standards are going to be kept and certain things are going to be done. However, did you know that there are kids that get kicked out of regular school, and because they can't get back into regular school, they then are put into a private school because they have to pay the money, but the private school, who needs the money, doesn't necessarily vet the kids to the degree they should. So that's how you end up with bullies in that environment. I'm sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because it is absolutely true. It's just like one child being transferred over to the next, school, and they do that all the time. I mean, it is common. So I always tell parents the best way to raise confident, bully-proof kids is by educating them. And you cannot educate them if you're not talking to them and speaking with them. And let them share the stories of what they see at school. Ask them directly, like, so do you see bullying at school? Really? How do you see it? Who did it happen to last? Did any of your friends experience it? What about you? Oh, you'll be surprised how much these kids will say.
And isn't it important to not discount what the child is telling you?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, I'm so glad that you said this, because I remember the first time I asked a child, because a parent brought him to me, and I asked him, so how come you didn't tell your mommy or daddy? And they said, well, last time I told my dad, he said, are you sure that's what happened? So right there, you just invalidated that experience. And it doesn't matter how small it seems to them, it's a huge problem.
It's their world.
Yes, it's their world. So please don't say anything like, are you sure that happened to you? Or what did you do? What did you say? Or, man, are you sure you're not being soft? I mean, I know you're very sensitive. Are you sure that's really what you saw? Or is that really what you heard? All of those type of questions, all of those type of responses are horrible. You will lose your child there. Your child will not confide in you. But if you say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry that happened to you, I love you, you don't deserve that. You don't. And then the other magic question is, how can I help you? Not, this is how I'm going to help you. Because remember, I told you earlier, kids need just one person to support them. And a lot of times they actually know how to solve the problem. They just need to run it by you because you're the parent, and they find validation in your opinion. And you might see maybe little gaps of something that they're missing, and you might help them improve that if they ask you. But for the most part, just let them be the ones who are leading the solution. This is where the conflict resolution lesson comes in. And you get to be part of that by watching and standing by. And you can add to it if you feel like, oh, okay, well, you know what? Yeah, that's a good idea. But how about if we try this? Well, how do you feel about that? Let them lead it. But always remember to go at it from a positive standpoint. From the moment they say I got bullied, never place blame. Always say you're gonna be okay. Always remind them that they are loved, because that's really what they need. And man, you're gonna take a huge weight off their shoulders just knowing, man, my parents got my back. And I want to add, when they know that you're educated about the policies and about how to go and talk to that teacher instead of being the parent that gets all loud and stuff and makes everything worse, they're going to have so much more confidence in coming to you for help, because they'll know you are the right person who's going to have their back, and they're going to get the solution that they need.
There's a term I learned a few years ago that I still use to this day when it comes to those kind of tough dyadic encounters, and it's called unconditional positive regard. You have to deal with really hard topics sometimes, but if you like keep that as your mode of operating in the conversation, it can go a long way. I think.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
love this.
Yeah,
We have her back, Kevin. I got a question.
Absolutely. Can I just add one more thing? Because I feel like this is another reason why bullying happens, is the lack of education about diversity.
Mhm.
If you think about every single altercation, it was always because the bully thought that they were a little weird, too different, just not part of their clique, like not the same, which is crazy, because when you think about the most famous artists, whether they're actors or singers or actual artists, like that paint or draw or whatever, they're famous because they are different.
Mhm.
And I remind kids about this when they're beating themselves down about being too weird or too different. And I'll pull out a name. Like, okay, Lenny Kravitz, he's a little weird, right? A little different. Prince, a little odd, right? Not like everybody else, but everybody loves him. Or pull out like a name of their favorite artist or rapper or singer or whatever. That's what makes us so unique. And diversity and understanding culture and understanding why, even here in the United States, although we all speak English, we all have a different dialect. And some people are so adamant and so like they refuse to accept the fact that we have different accents. Because when they hear me, or when they used to hear me, I don't know if you hear my accent as much, but learning English, I was told I was the only one with an accent. But then I went to the South and I could not understand my drill sergeant, because I was in the Army, by the way. My drill sergeant was telling me to repeat like there's so many steps of first aid. And I was like, what is she saying? And I'm like raised in California. And I was like, is she speaking English? Yeah, she's speaking. I was like, oh my gosh, what kind of English is this? I've never heard it before. Like, oh, it's the South. It's the dialect. I was like, oh my gosh.
It's a dialect that we have down here that you all should take it and use it everywhere, because we're perfect down here.
Seriously. So yeah, just learning diversity within your own communities, so that they don't use that as a justification to mistreat somebody or to just label them as less than, and they'll be so much happier too, just not being that ignorant person in the room saying things that are offensive or that come off as racist. It's so important.
Holly, would you do me a favor and invite Dali back to come back and do this again?
I would love
Because
that.
Thank
we've
you. I would love that too.
we have so much. There's a whole subtopic that I want to get into that involves PTSD and involves autism and different degrees and how you deal with it effectively, and how to get parents to deal with it. A gal that Miss Bozois, her son is autistic, and she had to go to school because after COVID, he did really, really well being homeschooled. And he went back to school, and they said, you can't homeschool him. He's now here back in school. And she said, oh, really? Do you really want to go down that road? Because he doesn't do well here. There's going to be fights. There's going to be problems. You're not going to be happy. Let him stay home. And the principal eventually gave in because she was going to kill him. But those are the things that parents have got to advocate for their kids, because your child. If you don't know your child best, have dinner with them every night.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely.
And if you don't do that, then I can't help you. I don't know what to say. Ladies, come up with a better answer.
No, I mean, even if it's McDonald's at the dinner table, just do it. Kids.
You can have McDonald's at the dinner table. I would love that.
Yeah. No, because some people think it has to be like a home cooked meal. No, it's just sitting down. That's the whole point. Sitting down and having some time together. Or like I said, take them for a long drive in the car. They can't run away from you. But find those little pockets of time where you're not doing anything. Like one of the things that I also like to do with my kids is tell them, like if we're waiting for a doctor's appointment to go in or whatever, like put the phone down, let's talk. And let's observe people. Let's watch people. Like, what do you think? We'll do silly things like, what do you think they're talking about? Oh, you will make up a whole story, and just laugh about it. And they kind of get to see that, hey, you're human too. You're not just mom and dad. Because that's another thing too. Like kids are like, oh, this is mom. She's not gonna get it. Or if you are on the phone, show me your funniest memes. Like, what do you like to look at? Like. Or through that, I learned at one point, my girls were all hyped. They're like, oh my gosh, look at this. This is the fight that happened today. And then this is the second one. And I'm like, no. It's like, I'm going to share. I'm like, no, you don't share. Don't help share that horrible content on there. If you're going to capture something on video, do it to like go and help, the person who's being attacked. But anyway, so just find those little pockets of time to have these conversations and have fun with it. It's not always about teaching them something, but they are always going to learn something from you.
Nancy, Amy, I want to thank you so much for bringing Dolly here. This is very, very, very helpful. I think it's great for our audience, and it's great for all of us, and we could use so much more of it. And Holly's going to get together with you, and we're going to figure out how to get you back on the show.
Thank you so much, Kevin, Holly, and Nancy, and Amy. I love this. This was really fun.
And Holly, I would love for you to take us out, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you so much for tuning in with us, where we featured the Passionistas from the Passionistas You have been listening to them and us talk to Dahlia about anti-bullying, and you're listening to Positive Talk Radio, coming to you on so many platforms. And they'll be back. When in November is the next show?
October 21st, right?
No,
right.
Kevin's going to be out. Yeah.
That's right. So November, the first Monday in November.
November. So stay tuned to hear more from the sisterhood and the Passionistas in the beginning of November.
Yes.
And by the way, I just want to thank everybody that is with the News Tribune in LA. We are on their podcast page now, so you can go to the LA
Tribune Podcast Network. Yeah, it's the most recent network that we're on now.
But sadly, we've only got 800 and some odd shows. So that's only 800 hours. So you can listen to it for a month, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and not run out of content. So
do it binge.
Thank you, ladies. You guys are just extraordinary.
Thanks for having us. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Positive Talk with Kevin McDonald. Our purpose is to provide everyone with a positive, entertaining, and educational experience. I would love your feedback and comments about the show, including possible topics and great guest suggestions. Please email me at kevin@kmmedia.pro. And remember, be kind to one another, because each other's all we've got.